Plugin of the week is the Plugin Alliance Lindell 354e. The Lindell 354e is a multiband version of the 254e, which is a stereo limiter compressor emulation of the 2254e compressor. This was created the original 2254 was created by Rupert Neve back in the late 60s, and there were variations of that were built subsequently. This is one of them. One of the unique things that's different about this from the standard 2254 is that it has slow and fast attack settings, and it also has a threshold versus the original 2254, which had no threshold, and you adjusted the input gain over a fixed threshold. The 2254E, or the 3054E, excuse me, in the multiband version, essentially takes the compressor section from this with some additional attack time settings and the same recovery settings, and gives you multiband control, allowing you to expand upon the characteristic sound of this classic bridge diode compressor and bring that out into a multiband level for mixing, for mastering, for parallel compression. It's full of a lot of amazing things that you can do with it. So if you're at all familiar with the 2254, then and the way that compressor works, or you already have the Lindell 254E, then you have a good idea of the capabilities of what the basics of it are. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to run a little bit of audio through it and in a mixed situation, and kind of show you, or in a sort of on a mixed bus situation, and that way you can get a sense of what it's all about. Let's start down here at the bottom just to kind of go through some of the basic settings, and then we'll kind of work our way up to the top. What you have is a high-pass filter for the sidechain here down at the bottom. This is showing you what frequency it's set at. So it looks like there's another off button there, but it's actually not the case. This is just telling you what the status of it is. You have crossover points from low to mid and mid to high. The crossover basically is 6 dB per octave is the way it worked around the centered frequency. You have a mix control here. This allows you to do parallel compression on a mix or within any given track. You have a master output gain, so this will be after all of the individual output gains that you have on the standard setup here. And then you also have 3 buttons here which allow you to control the settings. Now what you have here is a link button. The link button allows you to link the parameters together. One thing that you should be aware of is that if you have an individual setting that is, say, off from the others, if you link and then you change that setting, they will all snap to that same setting. Okay, so it doesn't preserve an offset, something you should be aware of when you're using the plugin. So kind of work with this to create your initial setup, and then be careful as you're kind of going around and working with it. So I'll demonstrate some of those things and a good way to work with it. The Nouveau filter, if you're familiar with the Plugin Alliance Nouveau filter, essentially what it is it allows you to set a frequency that basically you can tilt from. So as you pull the gain towards the right, it'll add more high end while taking away low end at the same time. And then in the opposite direction, it will do the opposite. So the Nouveau filter is kind of, the way they describe it is it's designed more for mastering purposes, but what it does is it applies this filter to the sidechain, thus compensating so that when you are applying the gain reduction, the threshold settings are more similar across the spectrum. So what you'll have is generally more energy in the lower level, and then subsequently gets less as you go higher in frequency. So this kind of balances that off a little bit. The Nuke button is one way of using the compressor, and most of the time this is used with the mix control in parallel. The idea is that you completely overdrive the compressor, so you're pushing a lot of energy, you're getting a ton of gain reduction going through, and then you mix in the amount as a way of bringing in a solid sound. You could also run it in parallel or on a send return configuration and bring it out at 100%, and then you can blend it in as like sort of a parallel compression kind of thing. When you work with the individual settings, I'll stay linked here. We have the ratio. So this is the standard settings that you find with the 2254E, which is 1.5, 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 4 to 1, and 6 to 1. So you can kind of go through those settings. You could put individual bands in and out. You can solo the individual bands. So if you ideally you would not be linked if you wanted to solo, we'll go through some of that. Now, when you work with this, you can actually work with the bands either individually or all together in stereo, so it'll affect both left and right, or you can have the bands work just on the side or just on the mid. So if you do it on individual bands, this would allow you to do high frequency compression only on the side while working on mid signals with the other two bands if you wanted to work it that way. Or if you wanted to do a pure mid-side configuration, you could duplicate this and have the second one just work the sides and the first one just work the mid signals. You could do it like that in some form of a kind of parallel compression or a parallel kind of way, or a serial kind of way, actually, if you look at it that way. That's another way to kind of go about that. So you want to be careful about the setting here. I'm just going to operate it in stereo here. It wasn't linked, so let me just kind of make sure that's all the same. What you have is a makeup gain for each individual band. You also have a threshold for each individual band, so that all stays the same. You also have a separate attack time for each band and a release. So one additional setting is 100 milliseconds, and so for a faster release time. And I think the original 2254, the fastest time was 400 millisecond release. Also, the faster you get super fast attack time. So this gives you additional settings as to what is standard. So the 2 microseconds is very small. Very, very fast, extremely fast. And then you have 0.5, 2 milliseconds, and 10 milliseconds. So I'm going to start with the 10 milliseconds here. And let's start with a 3-to-1 compression. When you kind of work with a compressor, the thing about this, and one way to think about this as you're working with it, is the way that you select the ratio is based on how warm you generally want the sound to be. So if you work with a higher ratio, you'll get a bit more warmth and body out of it. If you work with a lighter ratio, it'll be a little bit more on the transparent side. So depending upon what kind of tonal coloration that you're looking for, you'll get some kind of variation here. The transformers that make up the original 2254 compressor are a big part of the sound, as is the bridge diode component, which affects the way that the compression is applied. This is a big part of a transformation from tube components in the 60s, and starting from the mid-late 60s, there was a transformation towards solid state components, and which there are lots of reasons why it worked out better just in terms of repair and all that sort of stuff. And that kind of bled into the 70s. And so a lot of the classic consoles of the 70s are all solid state consoles, leaning away from the tube technology. Still plenty of that in other gear, but as far as compression and as far as the approach to processing, that was kind of what was going on at the time. Let's have a listen to some audio here. So we'll start. What I'll do is I'll play bypassed here, and then we'll kind of set this up with a basic 3-to-1 ratio. And I'll start here. Maybe we could do kind of a quick pump here where we have a slower attack and a faster release. Let's see what we can work with here. So. I'm going to adjust my thresholds here outside of line. So what I'll have here is just a little bit of makeup gain here, which I'll do on the individual band. And then let's just kind of do just a quick A-B of what we have with this. So this is one classic way to sort of pump and add a little bit of life into a mix. It's also, there's something about this, like you'll really notice how it opens up and images the low and low mids really, really well, which is a classic part of what makes this, this emulation so powerful. And what's so cool about it. One other quick note about the metering. What you see on the left here is a metering for the gain. for the overall level, and then you see gain reduction in the black numbers on the right-hand side. So when you're in control mode, and I'll just link it here for a second, then you'll follow the numbers on the right-hand side, and if you're in input or output, then these will be showing the levels. There's also some calibration settings here. So if you want, if you're working within a certain standard, it defaults to 18 dBFS, then that will show up more or less right around 0 there in terms of your level. And you can select your standard, whatever way, from -20 to -12. There's also oversampling, and this can help tremendously, or help if you're getting any kind of aliasing artifacts. So applying that gives you some ability. You can go all the way up to 16:1 in terms of the oversampling, and you can also change the size of the user interface. Right now it defaults to 100%, but if you want to fit other plugins on the window that you can compare, you can shrink it down. And then obviously the about tells you about the plugin, what version number, updates, and all that sort of stuff. So let's have a listen to this one more time. Let's just kind of see where we're at here in the control mode and go through some of the different ratio settings so you can get a sense of what that's all about. So obviously you're going to get more gain reduction here. So what I'm going to do here just very quickly is I'm going to add a little bit of gain on the input here, just to derive a little bit more energy on the input. And so I'll just kind of balance this off on the back end, kind of do a similar thing. And then what I could do is I can just copy that over to here, and then let's do a 6:1 setting. This is a way of calibrating the input and output kind of going through, so I can do a quick comparison here. So let's see here, 2 to 1.5 to 1. So without getting too much into perfectly matching the gain, I think the 6:1 is a little bit less output gain, but you could hear how it's like a warmer, less open, where the 1.5:1 is definitely leans more towards the open side. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back to my original settings here, stay on a 3:1 as sort of a medium, and show you a little bit of some other settings. So one other sort of classic limiter setting here would be like around a millisecond attack time. So we'll kind of play around between 0.5:1 and 2 milliseconds. I'm sorry, 0.5 milliseconds or 2 milliseconds with an auto release, which is another classic thing. The auto release is a multi-stage release. So you get an initial recovery, and then you get a longer, somewhere around like 10, 12 seconds in terms of a total release time. And that's sort of because it's originally a broadcast limiter, they would have these long releases so that you wouldn't get this quick recovery with all this ambient noise energy coming up from the makeup gain. This way it would kind of go very slowly, and that way if there was a pause in whoever was talking in the radio broadcast or whatever, or there was some silence, that you wouldn't get this quick recovery with the noise picking up. So let's have a listen to this and kind of work with it. All right, so let me go back here with the gain reduction here and kind of recalibrate some of this. I'm just gonna use just to recalibrate these because the recovery takes so long. It's harder. Just to kind of get that in the ballpark here, and now I'm going to switch these guys up to auto. So it sort of catches up with you a little bit. Here we go. This is pretty good. A little bit aggressive on the attack, but let's pull it down to 2 milliseconds here. Maybe allow a little bit more of the transient to cut through. I'll probably have to pull these guys back to a few notches here. Let's see. More open. All right, so I'll go back and just do that comparison again. And what you can get with this is like a nice, like warming, cool averaging kind of thing that doesn't cut down on the peak too much. So you have a lot of variation that you can work with. A couple of other things I want to show you in Nuke mode, but also I want to point out something here when you're working with the bands, just in terms of tuning them, depending upon the instrument or whatever it is that you're working with. You can tune these guys, you know, everywhere from like down to 50 all the way up to 5K. So you have a broad range there, and then this one goes down to 200 and all the way up to 12K. So you have a pretty broad range of a spectrum way of working here. Now, when you actually set this up, it's worth sometimes listening and soloing up the individual bands as you kind of go along, just to kind of check your crossover points. So this way, if there are certain aspects of, say, like a piano that you want to bring out, you can kind of focus a particular band on that area that's maybe a troublesome area or a hole in the piano sound that you're trying to kind of warm up or fill out or something like that. And that way, you can focus your settings in on that particular area to kind of balance it out. So those solo buttons end up being a very powerful way of focusing the sound on this. Now, when I went through this, just like, you know, pretty much, you know, focusing on the bass and the kick drum, a little bit of all of the mid-range drives. and the top end energy, presence energy. So, so these happen to work out pretty well, but if you kind of work through them, you can get a lot out of it. So that's an important thing to consider when you're using the plugin. The Nuke setting, when you set this up, generally it's probably not a bad idea. It will add a lot of gain. So what you're going to get is a massive amount of gain reduction. And then what I'm going to do here is I just kind of lift out of this by a percentage here. You'll see the amount of gain reduction here. So you can see how powerful that is in terms of bringing out the richness or fullness in something. You just basically, the one thing that's amazing about the 2254, if you've ever worked on the original gear, I spent a lot of time on the 2264, which is sort of a vertical rack-mounted version that was essentially the same, but I had also worked on the 2254, a few of the different variations of it that looks like this. It's kind of square. And generally they're fitted into the console in some way, if not rack mounted separately with outboard gear. But one of the amazing things about it is its ability to kind of pull, condense, and focus things in a way, especially in the low and low mids, where you get this real density that builds up, and it does this incredible thing to the imaging. And it's a very hard area when you get to low and low mid frequencies to get them to kind of image solidly in the speakers. And this is one compressor that does it amazingly well. It's great at warming up any kind of sound, like vocals that are a little bit bright or harsh or brittle. You can just kind of tone it down, warm it up, and bring body into something that just doesn't have that character into the original recording. So it's an amazing thing. And then when you work on it on a multi-band level, it adds on to that. So when you use that type of thing, like with a Nuke setting where you're really driving the components, that is a big part of the way that you make that happen. And the fact that you can kind of run this in a parallel situation makes that really powerful. So where we were here, just like somewhere in around 33%, was just like an amazing, focus on the low end, low mid. And it does so in a very present and open way. So it's really a powerful compressor. Just to give you an idea here, I'll just lower the gain a little bit and kind of hear, just so you can hear what it's like, just 100%. Sorry about the little gain jump there, but so be careful about that. But that's really, a very, very cool way of using it, and so that's like an amazing one. And with the multi-band control, you really have a lot of control, even with the gain of not just how it crushes that sound, so you can kind of reform it, great for parallel, but you can also control the amount of presence and mid-range as well as the low end and the balance of that. So you kind of have built-in equalizer as well as being able to adjust the individual settings for it. Really, really, really amazing, powerful tool for something that doesn't actually exist in hardware form. The creation of this and the way this is put together, very intelligently put together, and a very powerful, very unique kind of multi-band limiter. There's nothing really like this, because there's nothing really like the 2254 other than the 33609, which was basically a remake by Neve later on of that same compressor. Same basic idea, design with the bridge diode compression scheme. So, but this, the 354e, very powerful multi-band, loads of uses for this. This is easily going to be a regular part of your work if you kind of get into it. I've already started digging into it and using it on a lot of work, and it's an amazingly powerful tool. Gives you a lot of control. So that's it. That's the Lindell 354e from Plugin Alliance, and that is the plugin of the week.